The IMF has been advising Nigeria, and it's not the first time, but this time around it seems to have sparked a lot of dust and gathered a lot of flames. And they've advised again that Nigeria takes away fuel subsidies. The Minister of Finance has said they will do so gradually, and then they need to create buffers. But first off, you were at the vanguard of the non-removal of fuel subsidy in 2012. What would you say that protest achieved, considering that the removal was just partial and the price has increased 7 years down the line?
Now, I think the first thing we must identify about 2012 is that Nigerians were able to historically learn the possibility of organizing themselves, the need to build a mass movement, and use the strength and the entirety of that mass movement to put forward a program, to put forward an idea, a list of programs that will become the basis of transforming Nigeria. In the entire history of the universe itself, mass movements, their programs, and the ideas they represent has been at the heart of how society have been transformed. Like Marx would say, revolutions are the locomotive of history. So for 2012, even if the entirety of the idea of total reversal that was aimed at as that movement, 2012 has gone down into history alongside the June 12th movement as the possibility that Nigerians can organize themselves, and that in organizing themselves we must go forward, that a program is needed, a clear revolutionary mandate and leadership is needed to ensure that that movement will become a success.
But would you say that movement was biased, considering that in 2016 subsidies were removed in its entirety and prices rose from 97 to 145 and not much changed or not much happened in that activist and socialist space?
Now, mass movements are not like electric switchboards, on the wall that you can just on and switch off. It requires the entirety of a lot of programs. 2012 and 2016 were different. 2016, you had a government, the Buhari regime that had just come to power, that had sold an illusion in the mass of the people that it was going to be breaking, from the character and the appropriate character and the defined approach of how things was done and organized in the country by the ruling elites. Nigerians believe this. And on this basis, the Buhari regime hid under it, and on that basis, launch an increase in the pump price of fuel. Of course, again, you can't entirely take away the characters of the labor leaders at that material moment in time, who were divisive against themselves, who themselves fundamentally believed in these illusions that the Buhari regime was sowing, that it had come to transform the Nigerian economy for the benefit of the interests of the mass of the working people. But like I've pointed out, down the line, it was clear that the Buhari regime in 2016 was always taking us, on a fool's ride. Because even that increase itself, that Nigerians accepted, quote and unquote, was under a promise that it will end the existing subsidy regime, which Nigerians at that stage didn't naturally believe. But the Buhari regime wanted to be given a benefit of doubt by the mass of the working people. But ultimately, of that was betrayed in the first 4 years. The Buhari regime continued
advice
from its own people.
Well, that correction needed to be made. The advice wasn't sought, so it can be rejected. But from your explanation, it seems like the flames that build up around activism can always be easily doused, and it's not constant and it's not regular. But first off, what do you and other people who want to campaign for democracy and campaign for the masses, what do you define or what do you guys understand or perceive fuel prices to be? Should it be regulated, stable, even though the price of oil is not stable, or should it actually move with forces of demand and supply? Yes.
Now, what you refer to as the or internally,
at the moment is quite low, and to run the kind of society you are preaching, it needs very high taxes. personally, would you believe that subsidies is the only way that the fuel pump price can be kept at the rates that the masses can afford?
Now, nobody should be deceived by figures. Nigeria is not a poor country.
Okay.
There are a lot of things, if you must reconstruct Nigeria, that must be done with. And of course, like those of us at the barricade in 2012 made quite clear, it is the fact that the current crops of ruling elites are tied to a program that will not put Nigeria forward, that is not in the interest of the mass of the people. So we must replace that economic program with a program that puts the interests of mass of the working people.
So should people make losses? Should people make losses because the masses need to get fuel?
When you say losses, let's begin. I'm coming to that.
Okay.
The resources of this country, who controls it, and for whose benefit, who enjoys it? At the heart of these resources, if you must redevelop the country and you want to arrive at an appropriate market value, for what oil is, how is it that we don't have functional refineries? Are the ordinary Nigerians responsible for the collapsed state of the current refineries? If you look at all the Buhari regime between 2015 and present, they have spent over 8 trillion naira, for a subsidy regime. What is the cost of building new refineries?
If it will make sense for the government to take away the subsidies in order to build the refineries, wouldn't that make more sense?
This sense was thrown to us in 2016, was thrown to us in 2012, was thrown to us throughout the Obasanjo regime at every point that the pump price of fuel was increased. And none of these policy promises were implemented. So are Nigerians being taken for fool? And don't forget, this is not the first time we have seen it. We've seen it right from the launch of the SAP program by the Babangida regime. And up till date, over 12 or 13 times increase in pump price with the same promises that the economy will diversify, that the country will become independent. And at the same time, the ruling elites have refused to ensure that the resources of the country are adequately distributed in a way and manner that the ordinary mass will be able to meet their daily aspirations. For example, there is the question of the minimum wage that the regime has refused. If you dictate the price of inflation, is it not also democratically? Is it also not democratic to ensure that you have a regime that is paying the appropriate living wage to ensure that Nigerians meet the growing rate of inflation? The macroeconomic policies of devaluations and accepting all of the dictates and programs of the IMF has not paid off for Nigeria since 1986. That they have been principally adhering to all of the dictates of the IMF. And we must come to a new thinking. And that new thinking is that this country has enough resources. You have raised the question of taxation. Why is it that with the existing statistics that Nigerians are living under the poverty belt, is it the same people living under the poverty belt that you want to squeeze blood from, who are already suffering from a situation of blood shortage currently? You will expect that a regime, the Buhari regime, if it has the interest of the mass of the working people, will turn to the rich. All of the question of the resources that have been looted from all of this country in the past years, what has this government done about to reclaim all of those money as a basis, of another means of getting additional resources to meet its aspiration? How do you accept as correct a regime that continues to pay as much as the money it is paying, for debt
servicing,
right? debt servicing, and if you look at the huge figure of money that has been paid for debt servicing, that again is another huge scandal in the face of crying collapse universities, collapsing schools, public primary schools and secondary schools in the whole country. Our problem is not that the country does not have resources. Our problem is that the ruling elites are not ready to make any sacrifice from members of the billionaire club who have looted the resources of this country. Who are the people we should turn to to get the necessary wealth to redevelop the Nigerian economy. You can't get any naira or cover from people you are not paying living wages to, or you are not paying any money to for them to live beyond the poverty line. What this regime is doing by this policy is to sentence Nigerians who are already on the precipice of a grave into the underground to go and die and be buried.
Okay, so let's look at the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost to keeping fuel subsidies, you've mentioned 8 trillion. There are estimates of about 10 trillion spent in the petroleum subsidy fund in 2006. Now, looking at all this, don't you think that the opportunity cost is the health, the education that you are talking about?
What is the opportunity cost of all of the money that was saved when the subsidy price was removed in 2016? What was the impact of all of this money on the health sector? In the past 4 years, we have a situation where education is as in the worst state as it is. The health sector is as in the worst state. You had a president that was sick and had to be flown out of this country in spite of the fact that what was the opportunity cost? So you are dealing with a ruling elite that if there is an opportunity cost, practically nothing will happen.
So don't you think the focus of...
You must also not forget that you are operating with a regime that has defined its opportunity cost from the point of view of making profit for members of the billionaire club. And which is why not a single naira will be invested by these characters in education. Don't forget, it's an economy that is rapidly driving towards neoliberalism, and that is the fundamental crisis to the Nigerian economy. You have a Nigerian state that is controlling huge resources and is refusing to carry out any social responsibility on the basis of a neoliberal capitalist framework that the private sector should determine the economy. So there is no opportunity cost for a social responsibility for development in the education sector. These characters as rulers on the basis of the economic programs and macroeconomic policies are not ready to invest anything in education, health, and all other sectors of the
don't you think that should be the focus? Getting them to invest more in these things.
To do that, because these characters and these crops of ruling elites needs to be replaced. Their philosophy needs to be abandoned. So as long as they continue to tie themselves to the apron string of neoliberalism and receive consultative advice from the IMF and the World Bank, they are not going to invest in education, in health sector.
So that means you should then understand that it's not about petroleum subsidies, but about infrastructure and the need to direct funds to where it is needed. And don't you think that then should be your focus and not on the removal of subsidies?
On the basis of these characters, our focus should be that this ruling elite should be replaced. Nigerians must begin to organize themselves.
Well, there was a ballot recently, and you made your choice. So, anyways,
we made our choice. A general election, there was no election in the first instance. The screaming figures, for those who know what elections are and what happened at the general election, you know that practically no election took place. So all of the huge figures that were declared, were not votes in actual fact.
Okay, well, that would be left to the courts to prove. And just to wrap up, what is the stance of the labor group, the masses, as you would like to say you support and defend? What is the stance of the masses?
I think first and foremost, the labor leaders, as represented by the NLC and
they faulted the IMF.
Yeah, they faulted the IMF. I think that's a step forward.
Okay.
But I don't think that is enough. There is a need to come out with a clear programmatic, demand and line of action as compared to 2016. To begin, to make it quite clear that the Nigerian working people are not going to accept any attempt to increase the fuel price. That in itself is not enough. We must also say that the labor leaders have gone ahead to reject any attempt to increase the prices of VAT. But tied to all of these things, it must come forward to demand the immediate implementation of a new minimum wage. And not just demand that, carry out all of the necessary activities to ensure that all the states are paying. This country is rich enough to pay living wage for the mass of the working
people.
Pay
living wage, pay subsidies, and drive the economy.
The subsidy does not exist. The subsidy regime is only a false attempt, to use public funds.
Well, I'll just tell you,
which will continue to fail.
I'll just let you know, for the sake of the masses and the labor force, that the landing cost for petrol is 207 naira.
That you can overcome by building a refinery.
As of January.
That you can overcome by building a refinery. What does it take?
And that money for refineries
from refineries
can be.
Are the ruling elites telling us that this country does not have the resources or the technical know-how to muzzle its own resources to build refineries for itself?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been nice talking to you.
You see, a lot of people in Nigeria, in fact, 99% of people I have talked to, the question they always ask is that, why is petrol not cheap in Nigeria since we produce it? Okay? And I think that's a very big mistake, because it is not the whether we produce oil in Nigeria that is important as a driver of the price of fuel. What drives the price of fuel? The most important decisive factor, instigating factor in the pricing of fuel is the Naira exchange rate. I want you to understand it very well. And in order that you understand it, I will say it 3 times. The issue of fuel price and subsidy are all predicated on the Naira exchange rate. In other words, if the Naira falls to 500 Naira to a dollar, you'll find that the price of petrol would also rise accordingly. If, on the other hand, the price of the Naira or the dollar, for example, falls to 150 Naira to a dollar, you will find that the price of petrol will fall to about 130, 140 Naira per liter. So you will, by that analysis, you will find that I'm not saying that the price of petrol and the need for subsidy is directly dependent on crude oil price. No, the advantage of having crude oil in our backyard is that we can sell it for dollars. It means that the more crude oil we sell, the more dollars we earn. That is why when the price of crude oil rose as high as about $150 per barrel a few years back, our reserves went to about $60 billion or thereabouts. Okay? That is what we should get. Now, the point is, you would expect that as the volume or value of dollars we are earning is increasing, it will be increasing at a rate that is faster than the growth of the Naira supply. So consequently, what should be your net gain of being a producer of crude oil should be a stronger Naira, because you earn more dollars when you sell your crude oil at a good price and in good quantities. So you must